The billionaire's private jet was dead on the runway. Time was running out, and millions were on the line as the world waited for him to take off. Top engineers had failed, executives were panicking, and no one expected a solution anymore. Then a poor, unknown mechanic stepped forward, wearing worn-out clothes and carrying nothing but old tools and quiet confidence. What he discovered inside that jet didn't just save the flight, it exposed a truth that would shock a billionaire, silence the entire runway, and trigger a proposal so unexpected that it would change this mechanic's life forever. This is not just a story about fixing a jet, it's about destiny, dignity, and how one overlooked man was finally seen.
The jet stood silent on the far edge of the private runway, its massive silver body glowing faintly under a restless sky that threatened rain. Around it, executives in pressed suits paced nervously, phones glued to their ears, voices sharp with urgency. This was not just any aircraft. It belonged to one of the most powerful billionaires in the world, a man whose schedule moved global markets and whose delays cost millions per minute. And yet, on this morning, the jet refused to start. Engineers had already failed. Time was bleeding away. No one noticed the lone mechanic walking toward the aircraft, his boots worn, his jacket faded, his face carrying the quiet exhaustion of a man used to being invisible. This was not how his day was supposed to begin. He had been called in as a last resort, the kind of call that only comes when pride has been swallowed and options have run out. He was known around small regional hangars as someone who fixed what others could not. But he had never worked on something this massive, this guarded, this symbolic of power. As he approached the jet, security eyes followed him closely, measuring his worth by the condition of his clothes rather than the steadiness of his steps. He carried no arrogance, no showmanship, only the weight of years spent fixing broken things while his own life remained fractured. Before the story goes any further, pause for a moment. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of good intentions, take a second right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that small acts can change lives forever. The mechanic's life had not been kind to him. He grew up watching his father work himself into the ground at a local garage, only to die before ever enjoying the fruits of that labor. He inherited the tools, but not the opportunities. Dreams of engineering school were replaced by bills, responsibilities, and a family that depended on his hands more than his ambitions. Every engine he fixed felt like a reminder that he could make machines fly, but could never lift himself high enough to escape his circumstances. As he circled the jet, he felt the tension humming through the air, not just from the aircraft, but from the people surrounding it. The billionaire was expected within the hour. Meetings overseas were waiting. Deals were hanging by threads. Failure here would not be forgiven. The mechanic placed his hand against the cold metal, closing his eyes briefly, listening. Years of experience had taught him that engines spoke if you were patient enough to hear them. Where others saw complex systems, he saw patterns. Where others rushed, he slowed down. Hours earlier, certified engineers had torn through diagnostics, replacing parts, running software checks, blaming sensors and systems. But the mechanic did something different. He started with the basics, tracing connections, checking components others dismissed as too simple to fail. Sweat gathered at his brow as he crawled beneath panels, his hands moving with deliberate care. Every second felt heavier than the last. Around him, doubt thickened. Whispers followed his movements. Some questioned why he had even been allowed near the jet. Others already prepared excuses for the inevitable delay. No one expected success, least of all him.
He was not trying to impress anyone. He just wanted the engine to breathe again. As time slipped closer to disaster, he found it. A subtle fault buried deep, something overlooked because it wasn't supposed to fail. A flaw hidden not by complexity, but by assumption. Carefully, he worked around it, adjusting, repairing, restoring balance. When he stepped back, his body ached, his hands trembling slightly. He nodded once, signaling readiness. The moment the engine roared to life, the sound cut through the air like thunder. Conversation stopped, phones lowered. The jet stood alive again, powerful and ready. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. Relief spread like wildfire. Executives exhaled. Schedules snapped back into place. The impossible had been undone by a man no one had believed in. But the mechanic didn't celebrate. He wiped his hands, closed his toolbox, and prepared to leave quietly, the way he always did. He had done his job. That was enough. Except this time, it wasn't. As he turned away, a black luxury vehicle rolled onto the tarmac, stopping just short of the jet. The billionaire had arrived earlier than expected, and his eyes were already fixed on the man walking away. The billionaire was known for control over markets, companies, and people. Yet as he stepped onto the tarmac, something unfamiliar stirred within him. He had been told the jet was grounded, that delays were unavoidable, and now here it stood, engines ready, time restored. He demanded to know who had fixed it, not out of gratitude, but disbelief. When his gaze landed on the mechanic, something shifted. This was not the image of genius he expected. There was no polished confidence, no tailored suit, no entitlement. The mechanic was summoned back, his heart pounding louder than the engines he had revived. Standing before the billionaire felt surreal. A man who lived in headlines now looked at him with intense focus. The mechanic felt small, but not ashamed. He had learned long ago that dignity didn't come from wealth, but from work done honestly. The billionaire asked questions, not with arrogance, but curiosity. How had he found the issue? Why had others missed it? The mechanic explained simply, without embellishment. He spoke of patience, of listening, of respecting machines instead of overpowering them. As he spoke, the billionaire saw something he hadn't encountered in years: authentic mastery without ego, skill forged through struggle rather than privilege. What the mechanic didn't know was that the billionaire was standing at a crossroads of his own. Years of relentless pursuit had cost him relationships, trust, and meaning. He had built an empire, but it felt hollow. Everything in his world was transactional. Everyone wanted something. And now here stood a man who had asked for nothing and delivered everything. Instead of dismissing him with a paycheck, the billionaire did something unexpected. He invited the mechanic to stay, to talk, to share his story. Over the next hours, as the jet remained parked, they spoke of lives lived on opposite ends of society, yet bound by similar losses. The mechanic spoke of missed chances and quiet resilience. The billionaire listened, truly listened, perhaps for the first time in decades. What began as professional curiosity turned into something deeper: respect, then admiration, then a strange sense of responsibility. The billionaire saw not just talent, but a man whose life had been shaped by limitation rather than lack of ability. He thought of how many like him had been overlooked, buried beneath circumstance. For all his wealth, he realized he had done little to change that reality. Days later, the mechanic returned to his modest garage, expecting life to continue as it always had, but it didn't. Calls came, opportunities followed. He was invited to consult, to advise, to step into spaces he had never been allowed into before. Each time, the billionaire ensured his voice was heard, his work recognized. Still, the mechanic remained cautious. He had learned that hope could be cruel if trusted too easily. He focused on his work, his family, his values. He refused to be dazzled. Then came the invitation that changed everything. He was asked to come to the airport again. No explanations, just a request. As he arrived, the runway was empty except for the jet and a small gathering of people. The air felt heavy, expectant. He sensed something was different, but could not name it. The billionaire stood waiting, not in a boardroom, not behind assistants, but alone on the tarmac. What happened next would ripple through the mechanic's life forever. Under the open sky, with engines silent and the world holding its breath, the billionaire did something no one expected. He spoke not of contracts or compensation, but of purpose. He spoke of how fixing that jet had exposed something broken in himself, how watching a man work with integrity had reminded him of what mattered beyond profit. Then, in front of everyone, he made a proposal, not of romance, but of partnership. He offered the mechanic leadership over a new initiative, one focused on training, mentoring, and lifting skilled workers from obscurity. A chance to build something lasting, a chance to rewrite not just his own story, but thousands of others like him. The mechanic stood frozen. His mind raced through memories of sacrifice, of doors closed, of being unseen. This was not just an offer. It was validation. It was trust. It was a future he never allowed himself to imagine. Tears welled in his eyes, not from joy alone, but from the weight of finally being recognized. He accepted, not because of wealth, but because the mission aligned with everything he believed in. The runway that once symbolized distance between worlds now became a bridge. In the months that followed, the mechanic's life transformed. He traveled, spoke, taught. He remained grounded, returning often to the small garage where his journey began. He never forgot who he was. And the billionaire, changed by that single act of humility, found purpose beyond numbers. Together, they proved that kindness could disrupt power, that respect could rebuild lives, and that sometimes the smallest hands make the biggest impact. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that goodness still exists in unexpected places, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that inspire the soul. And before this story ends, leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from and what moment moved you the most. Your words matter more than you know. Because sometimes all it takes to change a life forever is one broken jet, one overlooked mechanic, and one moment of human truth.